right, listen up.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the 440th VFW Podcast. We had so much fun doing the first couple. We decided to do it again. Kind of cool. We're back again. I'm Tyrant, and with me once again are my co-founders, Derk.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, there's Derk, and also Zeus again.
Hey, it's Zeus.
Awesome. No comment. Anyway, so this is great to be back again with these guys. As always, we're just sort of here to talk, hang out a little bit, but also, as always, we have a general idea of a topic we want to visit, and I thought maybe the thing that we could talk about tonight a little bit is our IQT program. IQT is Initial Qualification Training. This is the program that we use to bring people into the wing. I think it's just a really, really interesting topic for a lot of reasons that we'll get into at least some of. And it's really great to have both Derk and Zeus here with me because, unlike me, they are actually instructor pilots, and so their responsibilities are to bring people through the program. So they're both going to have some really good perspectives on why it is the way it is, what's involved, and all that good stuff. Anyway, looking forward to the conversation. That's probably enough of a preamble. I'm not really sure who to throw it to first. I think maybe I will randomly pick on Zeus. Maybe, Zeus, you could kick us off
Sure.
by saying just a little bit about what IQT is, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for tuning back in. As Tyrant mentioned, we just wanted to talk a little bit about our IQT training program, the Initial Qualification Training. And this is something that really, I don't know as though I certainly can't take full credit. It was something that I experienced as a cadet when I was with the first VFW when they were flying BMS, and it was a great program. It's something that I got a chance then to not only experience as a first-time VFW multiplayer flyer, but then also got to experience as an instructor pilot or IP, and ultimately as the head of that group's training squadron, got the chance to put my signature on it and really do some of the things that I wanted to do as well. And so this is really a culmination of a lot of people's work, and I'm sure the folks over there would tell you that they can't take full credit either. And it's things that have been learned by various multiplayer virtual pilots throughout the years. It certainly isn't the perfect document. We're still learning things. We keep tweaking things, and we learn. And as BMS continues to evolve, the program continually gets better and better. But I think it's a really good balance of 6, I'd say, orientation flights that focus on a variety of topics, everything from just simple formation flying and tack turns, getting then into air-to-air combat, both beyond visual range and within visual range, and then ultimately in deploying air-to-ground ordnance, whether it be dumb bombs to laser-guided or GPS JDAMs, and even throwing in some delivery tactics that include pop-ups and loft approaches, and doing fun things with SAM sites and hunter-killer tactics for doing seed missions and things like that. So it's a great experience. The flights are all, I don't know, correct me here, Derk, but I think it's on average they're between an hour and a half and 2 hours of flying time each, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
time before and after for briefings.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the big thing is we don't expect people to come in and be able to fly these flights perfectly. We take on members of all very skill levels, whether you're a first-time multiplayer flyer like I was when I first started, or you've come to us with multiple experiences from different wings. We put everybody through this. obviously we can take some shortcuts with people who have been, in virtual fighter wings at different organizations, so we can tighten things up a little bit. But it's really meant to bring everybody up to at least a common base level of operational experience or understanding on how we do things here at the 440th. So that's my long-winded answer to that short question.
Yeah, so I mean, I've only been through it as a student, but as I mentioned when we did our sort of Hello World episode, this was one of the key experiences in my BMS life, right? Like going through IQT, there were some great flights after that, but I think I'll kind of always remember that, and it is, I think it's important to mention that this is what I would consider one of the key benefits of membership. I mean, we're certainly happy to talk about IQT and the program, and we're not like trying to hold anything back as far as like we love the sim, and we are going to be doing the podcast and sharing all sorts of information. But I think it's also kind of important to mention that one of the reasons you might want to join the 440th is IQT. I mean, this is something like, I want to say 15 to 20 hour commitment on the part of the wing, right? Like it's that level of commitment for us to take a cadet through these 6 training missions that we'll go into more in a minute. And so while that is by no means does that mean that we're not interested in meeting people that aren't sure they want to do that. We absolutely are. Please come by, www.440thvfw.com. And we'd be happy to fly with you and get up in the air. But, when you get serious and you're like, hey, I think this might be the place for me, we have this thing in place, which is one of the reasons I want to talk about it tonight. It's just because, like, it's a big deal. It's a huge benefit, I think, is a good way to look at it. Now, obviously, we get something out of it, too, which is that at the end of it, we have a pilot that is able to do, like, a list of things that are important for people to be able to do in the flights that we fly the way we want to fly them. But I don't know. I just think that's an important thing to point out. So we mentioned that there's sort of 6 flights here, and one of the things I like about IQT is they're very logically organized. I mean, Zeus, you mentioned that this is the culmination, maybe not culmination, but it's the most evolved point so far of a process that's been going on for years, and you guys, the two of you in particular, have done a lot of work recently to, bring it forward even more. I wonder if I could throw it to maybe Derk. Would you be a good guy to talk about kind of what those 6 missions look like? Maybe break it down one at a time. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if it does, it'd be great if you do that.
Sure, absolutely. I'll give a bit of an overview on each one of them. The first 3 are air-to-air type flights. And then the last 3 are air-to-ground engagement. And it's a broad scope of a little bit of everything. We don't have the time to get into a high-level detail, but the IQT at least will identify to the pilot areas that he needs to work on that he never has tried before and realize that I need a little more work on it. Or, other areas that he's got down pretty good, we can get through it a little quicker. But it also identifies what we would like to train a little more on a certain pilot, a certain technique, or a certain area. So the way they're broken out, IQT1, we pretty much just start out no engagements on that. It's all just flying formations, flying some tack turns, and then getting on the tanker. It's really a good chance for just a quick hour and a half flight. It gives you an opportunity to fly with a cadet, get, the established communications and a standard that we have for communicating back and forth. But there's a lot of experienced, and I was 3 or 4 years of flying BMS before joining a squadron, and then thrown into doing tack turns that I had never done before. It was always like turn left, shoot at the bad guy, turn right, and go back home. So it was a good opportunity to, make these maneuvers that we actually do in missions. As well as the standard formations that we do use. So IQT1's fairly basic with that. Then in IQT2, we bring in the BVR stuff, which is beyond visual range. It's all AIM-120 shots out at targets that are, out over visual range. They're longer shots that we're taking at them to make sure that the cadet has a good understanding of how the radar works, how a 2-man engagement works, against contacts, and then what do we do afterwards? How do we evade or escape away? And then IQT 3 gets in a lot closer then, where we only load up the AIM-9P, which is a tail aspect missile, and it seriously is a tail aspect, because if you try to shoot it head on, or even at a 90-degree higher aspect, it's missing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to drive in almost into a guns position. Once in a while you can get a good missile off, but it's pretty much dogfighting, but it's a coordinated 2-on-1 type dogfighting scenario where you're working together to outmaneuver the bad guy aircraft. So that's the air part of it. Then we switch over to the ground part. IQT4 is doing the range at the Kotar range. We do it pretty a full scale type run there, where based on the documents that are provided for the range area, we have different dive bomb profiles, and we set up to do those, as well as strafing runs at it. And if you learn a really good basic tactic at the bomb range, you can start applying that to other places in missions. So we do that. There's also a low-level runway strike. There's a CBU engagement on some moving tanks. And we constantly keep throwing in the air refuel, and we keep throwing in the tack turns and the formation, just to make sure we got all of that study still coming up along. It takes quite a few hours to just practicing all of that stuff to come along, but by IQT4 things are clicking a little better. Then it gets a little tricky in IQT5. It's a nighttime flight. We do refuel at night. We're attacking surface air missile sites, and using the AGM-65s and the handoff mode to attack the ground targets that we just opened up for access by taking out the SAM sites. And then we come around and go back into a different air base where we're doing an ILS approach. So that's pretty wide scope of things on that flight, but it kind of nails down a lot of things some people don't get to do a lot, like the ILS type stuff. And
I think that's one that, sorry, Derk, but I think what you just said there really kind of points out something. That's one that touches on so many aspects and is probably the closest, I think, to an actual planned mission that the wing does, at least in my opinion. I think that one closely resembles one of the missions that we would fly, just based on all the different things going on.
Right,
Sorry.
Right. Nope. And the last one's pretty much the same way too. I mean, they're all choreographed missions. We have targets and objectives, and we need to hit them. The finale is IQT6, and we're doing more with the GPS bombs, dropping GPS bombs on targets. We get the chance to do buddy lasing, using laser designation from one guy while the others drive in. As a matter of fact, last night we had a flight where one was designating for two other aircraft to come in and drop bombs on moving tanks. And then we go off to do a lofting attack against some solid targets, and then we go and do a pop-up attack. So those are two tactics that some people don't have an opportunity to do. We throw in just to make sure there's a good understanding of it. And by the time you get done with that, the cadets that I've been through it, when we kind of call it graduating from IQT, or IQT6 is your finale, they really feel like they want to throw their hats in the air, like, hey, I graduated, I did something, I accomplished all these tasks.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of pride that's with them.
Absolutely. BMS is, I think, as everyone in the community knows, it's a heavy study sim, and there's a lot to learn, and there can be a pretty steep learning curve. And as you pointed out, joining a VFW is one of the benefits of having that relationship with others in the community that can teach you things. And it's a program like this that I think really does make someone that loves BMS feel really good about it and feel like they're really finally starting to get everything out of the sim that it promised. I know that's what it felt for me.
Yeah, me too. Definitely. Well, that's a really great overview. I mean, obviously, we mentioned that this is, something like 20 hours of instruction and briefing and debriefing and flying. And then, of course, we'll get into this a little bit more maybe. there's additional time that many people, at least those like me that weren't up on every single one of the many things you mentioned, need to do between. So like I would spend, I think Zeus, when we were flying, typical time for me at least was something like a week between each IQT session. And in between I was, right? I think that's fairly normal.
Yep.
Sometimes more, sometimes less. And of course I know that you guys for sure are more than willing to work with people in between IQTs to practice up. But, it's along those lines, right? Of course.
Absolutely.
Yep. So you get all done, and it's like I don't know, I didn't keep track, but, you're probably talking certainly upwards of 20, 30, 40 hours, who knows. It felt like a really, really significant accomplishment to me. I felt like celebrating, like you said, throwing my hat in the air. And on top of that, it made me better. So that was a very, very cool feeling for me as well. So I think people kind of got a general idea, but I wonder if, maybe now we could sort of laser in, and I don't know, I guess I'll throw it back to Zeus, and maybe let's talk a little bit about what like a typical, experience would be, sort of before, during, after, for one of the IQTs. So I'm sitting here thinking, let's say that I'm have never done this before, and I'm trying to think, what is it like? Like what, if you're working with me as a student, Zeus, what would you tell me how to get ready? And then when we get together on TeamSpeak, what are we talking about? And then when we fly, how is that going? You know what I mean? Just sort of maybe walk me through a single. Pick whichever one you want.
Oh, the material that's available also.
Right.
Absolutely, and that's where I wanted to start. Is we don't just say, "Hey, welcome aboard. Come on, let's go up, and we're going to start flight 1." We have a training syllabus that outlines all of the things that we're going to be doing. It's about 100 pages long. It really dives deep into what each of the missions is going to be doing, and we get into some of the tactics. We try not to repeat the great material that's already out there that you can find in the standard BMS documentation. In fact, we in several places refer you back to the training missions or other documentation, and that's part of what I think people like about this document, is that it kind of is a one-stop shop, because there is so much material out there. And the BMS team has done a phenomenal job at pulling all these things together. But I mean, this is a detailed sim, and so there is a plethora of information. So we've tried to boil it down to, here are the things you need to work on to keep yourself alive as a V pilot, and we take you through, each of the things that Derk mentioned, whether it's a BVR engagement or deploying air-to-ground ordnance, and we boil those key elements down. We point you to other sources of information, and then as both Tyrant and Derk mentioned, when we do finally get together for that IQT flight, we spend, it varies. I would say anywhere from, if you're an experienced virtual pilot coming from multiple wings and been flying BMS for a while, maybe it's as short as 15 minutes. It's probably never as short as 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's pretty short talking.
But it could possibly be as short as 15 to 20 minutes in a briefing. If you really know all the material, then it focuses mostly on any 440th standard operating procedures, our SOPs that might be different than what you're used to flying in that particular engagement. So if we take a flight like, I don't know, we'll take IQT 5, the one that seems the most like a mission, I think, and we'll touch on the standard operating procedures. If you're new to some of these sort of things, or if you've just been playing single player, and you can kind of get the weapons off, and we're talking in this case about essentially suppression of enemy air defenses, right? Going after SAM sites, and also flying at night, refueling at night, and simulating an instrument landing. If you're new to all that, if you haven't done that in the sim, and we walk you through it, the material, we expect you to read, obviously, the material that we provide. As Tyrant mentioned, practice before you come into the flight, and we give you access to the the tactical engagements, the TEs that we've prepared that go along with the training material so that you can practice ahead of time. But then we walk through, do you have any questions? What were the things, have you been up and tried flying? And what were the things that you weren't sure if you were doing correctly or just couldn't seem to master? Anything that's come up since the last couple of flights that, wow, yeah, you made it through IQT 1 through 4, but looking back on it, boy, not really sure why this worked or didn't work. So we're constantly checking in and making sure that you're getting everything you need out of it as well.
Right. And the one I remember is being on, just sorry to jump in, but I remember being on one, and it's like, I hear you when we're doing, the approach that you're calling that I'm in for runway 36 full stop. And, I don't have general aviation experience, so I'm like, well, I've heard that like 3 times now. This is IQT 4. What does full stop mean? So anything is in scope, I guess is my point with that story.
Absolutely. Yep. And so because we're repeating so many of these things over and over again, we're going through the pattern work both in and, on departure and arrival back into an airbase. We're going through the air-to-air refueling. We do the same procedures over and over again, hence standard operating procedures. It starts to ingrain all that within the virtual pilot, and I'd say it's somewhere in that IQT 3-4 range that I think people start to relax and get comfortable, and it starts to become more muscle memory, and they have a chance to think more and ask more questions. So it could be 20 minutes of pre-brief time. Like I said, if you knew all this, it might be an hour and a half.
Good hour, yeah.
Yeah, if it goes beyond an hour, start telling your IP that, hey, I really want to get in the jet and fly, but because otherwise we can tell stories forever.
In your head then, yeah.
Right. But obviously we want to make sure that you're ready to jump in the pit. And then in the case of IQT 5, we do our standard taxi out, standard departure. We're introducing night flying for the first time, and so we talk about the new challenges at night. You're not going to have the same kind of depth perception. You don't have the same visual cues that you're used to. So, from a safety perspective, even though it's just a simulation, you want to fly safe. And so you're not going to necessarily have the same tightness in your formation, and you're going to want to allow more time to react and detect things, especially when you start doing night tanking. And how do you do that? Try it both with the night vision goggles on and off, and look at the difference and see how you can fly. And so it gives pilots a really good opportunity to do that. In some cases where we've got complex tactics that we're executing, typically there's time elements within an IQT flight where you're moving from point A to point B. We don't just roll right in from one to the other. And you've got 5-10 minutes of en route time, and you can talk about, hey, this is what's coming up. Do you feel comfortable? Make sure you check this. Have you done these checks on your system? Do you have the right weapon selected? All that kind of stuff. And it starts to help build that in-flight checklist for the pilot. And then once we get finished with the mission and we do a recovery, we do go through a debrief, and we try to keep the same format that we do for all of our missions. We focus on essentially 3 main areas: what went well, what didn't go so well, and what would we do differently if we were to fly that flight over again, knowing what we know now. And I think it's a good experience. And we really are looking for not just the instructor pilots to talk about what the cadet did well or not well, but also looking for the feedback from the cadets. Hey, you were there. You were trying to stay on my wing as an IP. What did I do well? What did I not do well? Because it's all about continuously improving all of our skills. So we really do encourage that open, honest feedback within the wing, and that continues even after IQ2, especially after IQ2. Mm-hmm. We do that debrief after every mission, and we make it very clear no one is above constructive criticism from anyone else. Mm-hmm. And really do want to point out things that, wow, guys, I know it worked this time, but that was either a risky move, or you kind of left your other flight or your wingman out to dry, and yeah, he made it home, but that could have ended very differently, things like that.
Totally. In fact, oh, sorry, Derk, go ahead.
good time to learn some new tactics too, because you may do something one certain way in the debriefings when an opportunity to say, hey, you did it this way, and you discuss it and you find out, there's a new way of doing something and it works out pretty good. So
exactly,
it's feedback also on a good learning experience of things.
Yeah, and in fact, I think this whole topic is important enough that this is one of the future episodes I kind of have in my mind, is that we would talk for a whole show about the debrief process and how we do it, and kind of how we like to apply it and all that good stuff. Not that we have to avoid it here, just I think that would make a great show all on its own.
We should probably grab some specific examples and share, like Derk just mentioned, what did we learn? And this is how we discovered this technique, or we exposed more people in the wing to it because of this flight, and here's how it unravels or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll have to do that for sure. Gosh, we've already committed to a 4th episode. Awesome. Anyway, no, we'd be happy to do that. Right. So I think there's a couple things that I think about when I think about IQT and think about sort of, questions people might have about it. One is, and you guys can choose, I'll throw 2 out and you can divide them up how you like. The 2 that I'm thinking about are, one is communications, because I think it is a huge deal, especially, and maybe exclusively, but certainly especially for people that haven't done much multiplayer. Like, it is one thing to fly the jet in BMS and maybe even manage an AI, or maybe even a whole flight of AI pilots. It is another thing entirely to fight and talk on the radio at the same time. For some reason, that is way harder than it sounds. So
Absolutely.
Communications, would love to hear one of you guys talk about that. And the other one is tanking. I think it's air-to-air refueling is one of these things that, people have certain perceptions about and maybe some apprehension. And you mentioned that we do it in IQT, in every IQT, in fact. So I wonder if one of you would mind jumping on one of those and one take the other one. That'd be great.
Well, Zeus, grab one, and then I'll just follow up on it if I got anything to add.
Sure. I was going to let you grab, but okay, you give it to
I
me.
can go first. I'll go first with the communications. I know, a lot of people do fly flight sims. Sometimes they're solo. They only hear what's coming over the AI, the voice. Others are probably pretty well involved in aviation. They understand, like, if they've listened to air traffic controllers, ever talk to aircraft on the radio, it's like there's an awful lot of things being rattled off all at once, but they both understand what's going on. So that communication does happen. Sometimes I listen to a video I've made after the flight, and it's just an unbelievable amount of things that were communicated extremely fast in just short little words, but we knew what was going on because we understand those words. And that just takes practice flying together to understand them. So communications is a biggie, not just making sure you're clear and concise, but it's to try to take a lot of information, shrink it down into tiny little blips of words that we can pass out to others. I remember a recent air-to-air engagement I was having with one of the wing members, and it's pretty quick on it. The chatter over the UHF was so loud with the AWACS calling and some other calls that were made. I didn't hardly have a chance to get over the Victor radio to make the quick engagement calls. And it was pretty much 90 left, engage, push, the quick little words, but the wingman was able to stay up with me, kept in formation. We both were able to engage the aircraft and both get back out safe. So, yeah, communications is a biggie, and it takes a little while to learn it and to get up to proficiency to do it. That's one of the other reasons for 6 IQTs to practice just getting the talking, because some have never done it.
Absolutely, yep. I couldn't agree more, and I think I know for me, going through the IQT program, as both Derk and Tyrant have said, it's the learning how to talk while fly, it's different. And I'm in real world, I'm a commercial pilot, have my own aircraft, and I've been flying for many, many years, and yes, I can talk and fly there, but there's something about being shot at and talking and flying that adds a level of urgency. And
that doesn't happen to you normally when you're on approach in your small aircraft? Okay, all right.
It's rare that I'm on the ILS, and get shot at.
All right.
And it's easy to get tongue twisted, but keeping it straight while you're getting shot, it's a good technique.
It is. Yep. So Dirk's absolutely right. We do include a discussion on brevity, which seems kind of almost contradictory, a discussion on brevity. In most of our flights, we talk about key brevity words that are important, whether it be for an air-to-air, air-to-ground, whatever. And I do like, we've tried to add some humor into our IQT syllabus, and I think this quote that Derk found for our SOPs on communications is so appropriate. The quote is that a pilot, and especially a wingman, should never miss the opportunity to be quiet on the radio.
Yeah, I love that one.
Communications are important, but it's also important to know when not to talk. My
other favorite one for that is the things a wingman should say are, how does it go? To, joker, bingo, Mayday, lead, you're on fire. I think in that order, right?
Those are the biggies.
The big ones, yeah. Yeah, and of course it's much more complicated than that because, in fact, we had a flight recently where the lead called for a 4-ship in the slot lineup, which we don't need to go into the details. That would be something we would cover in IQT though. And it's a certain way you line up on the runway for people who aren't aware. I was in the number 2 slot. He lined up in a place that I didn't quite line up with what I thought he meant. And I actually lined up in the wrong location as a result, did not get on the radio. And that was something that came up in debriefing afterwards, which was, hey, that's a place where even though I'm a wingman, I should have opened my mouth and said, hey, lead, I noticed you're lined up all the way to the right. I was expecting you center line. Where do you want me? So I think, all which is just to back your point up, which is to say, communications is a big deal. It is something that we focus on. It is something that, that is part of IQT is getting better at that, especially if you don't have experience. But of course the result is, you get to sound cool on the radio when you're done, right? You get to say awesome stuff like, I won't try to rattle anything off right now because I'd probably mess it up, but you know what I mean? Like we've all got that in mind, the fighter pilot, string of 20 words that all sound super cool.
Right.
Was it Technin that described it as being tactical?
Tactical,
right?
I think so.
Yeah.
So to put the tactical back in its place, and my last comment on comms before I jump over to air, one of the things that I tell new cadets, especially if they're new to multiplayer flying and learning how to talk and fly and fight all at the same time, is you really need to go through and practice, whether it's using the built-in dogfighting capabilities or flying some of the pre-built IQT flights that we've given you, but go ahead and actually get into them and make your calls, even though you're flying single player. I mean, actually say it out loud. Mm-hmm. Do it.
Press the comm switch.
Right. Press the comm switch. Do it. And yes, your significant other is probably going to really laugh at you. So all that technical goes out the window, but it's really the only way to learn.
Yeah.
Sounds odd, but it works.
It's a good tip.
Yep. All right, so let's talk a moment about air-to-air refueling, right? That's what we wanted to touch on?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, go.
All right. So yes, we do air-to-air refueling in each of the IQT flights. It's a very perishable skill, and we take people that who've come to us with no air-to-air refueling skills, because it can be a very difficult thing to learn. I mean, it's very close formation flying. And let's face it, any of us that have tried to refuel in the tanker in BMS know that the BMS tanker UI is sometimes a little mean and twisted and gives you a hard time with tanking, or can. So part of every IQT flight is just getting the cadet up to speed with how to tank. And we've got guys who are really good at it in the wing, and can walk you onto the boom and give you little pointers, and again, take someone who's never been able to connect to the tanker on flight 1 or before they started coming into IQT, and 6 flights later have somebody that can regularly get onto the boom. May not be the fastest in the world, but they get on the boom, they stay on the boom, and can top off their jet. And that, I know, for a lot of folks, it feels like a good accomplishment, and I think it is.
That was me. Yeah, that was totally me. And Zeus, I mentioned this before, you were my instructor pilot, and IQT1 I could not connect. And by IQT6 I was able to get on the boom in under 60 seconds and stay connected in the turn and all that good stuff. It was definitely a practice thing. It was definitely you helping me I think it's important to point that out both because, if I can do it, anybody can, but also because, it points out that, I think, if somebody kind of heard, oh, you tank in every IQT, they might take that as I can't tank, therefore I'm not ready for IQT. That's not the case.
Right. No, I was going to say we expect folks coming in who cannot tank, and so it's probably more properly said we attempt to tank in every IQT. And some of the flights can get long, and you get tired, and especially if you're new to it, you make 2-3 attempts, and if you can't do it, usually we knock it off and say, you know what, don't force it. Let's go either hit the alternate, or maybe we're close enough to home plate, we'll make it back, and then just go up before the next mission and just do a little practicing. And it does work, as Derk said. Mm-hmm. You relax, and boom, the next flight you're on.
Mm-hmm. And Zeus, you probably are like me at this stage. We can sit in our observer position and watch the different approach or the way that the cadet's going into it, and we almost have a sense of what they need to work at. We can sense that from them. Just seeing the approach that they're coming in, there's like a handful of coaching techniques depending on what they're doing that to give, and it seems like it really helps a lot. And it depends on what it is, if it's a lateral, longitude, or a speed thing. So the coaching ability, just have someone sit and watch you as you're moving in, can really help too. I recall one cadet, he was sitting almost in the perfect spot and was calling me on the radio, why isn't it connecting? And it's like, you're only 2 feet too far forward, mm-hmm. Just back out a little. You can't really see it yourself, and it gets very frustrating. But if you've got that second party there watching from a distance that can help you through, it helps a lot.
And sometimes it seems to take forever for that boom operator to plug in, and people start moving around because they don't think it's right. And you think, whip, slow down, be patient, just sit there for another second or two. Here it comes. Boom, you're on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That patience is hard to do sometimes when it seems like you've been there for 30 minutes trying to connect to the thing, and it's only 2.
Especially watching your fuel get lower and lower, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I think that's a big thing too for any of these skills, not just refueling, is sort of the existence proof, right? There's this, you're flying with somebody and they dodge an SA5, and the three of us are like, yeah, SA5s are pretty easy to dodge, but if that's something you've never done before, it's not clear to you that that's a thing that can be done. But once you sort of know it can be done, I feel like that's a huge advantage. Same for refueling, same for, you name it, flying the pattern at the range or overhead brakes or, whatever it is. Like just,
right.
Like, oh, it's totally possible. I just watched it happen. And then that, I don't know, I feel like that is actually kind of a key enabler for like a lot of skills.
It is. There's a lot of little wins you can get in BMS, to the little tasks that you can learn, and once you get to where you're able to accomplish it or get proficient at it, it feels like a little mini win.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think I've actually I've run through the list of questions that I sort of had in my mind beforehand. I certainly want to give, you guys have, this is actually something worth celebrating, I believe, and celebrating here with all of our friends listening. We recently got our first cadet through IQT. I think it was actually this week as we record this. Super, super cool.
Absolutely. Big milestone for the 440th.
Yeah, and in fact, I think we want to have him on, just because I think it's so cool that we've got them. We got a few more people in the pipeline as well.
Yep.
Anyway, but I wanted to make sure that, since you guys have done lots of IQTs in the past, the first, and now are leading the charge here as we bring people on and ramp up here at the 440th. If there's anything else that you think was worth mentioning, again, 20-hour training program, like I'm sure we could say more, but if there's any highlights that you think we should hit before
one other thing that came to mind for me is with our IQT program, usually the first one is just the IP and the cadet kind of feeling things out, maybe even the second one, but there's a lot of our IQT flights that they're interesting enough that the wing members want to come in and they want to fly with us.
Oh yeah.
So that not only gives a good rounded flight, it gives an opportunity for the cadet to fly with others, but that's something to say for the TEs that have been developed and created that are specifically tailored and match the material that we have. That they're interesting enough that, somebody's been rusty and hasn't had a surface to air missile attack in a while. It's like, well, I'll jump in and get this mission in, and I get a chance to shoot on it. And other different tactics that we have. The most fun is if we can get a force ship when we go to the Kotar range, because it's almost like a roller coaster in there. Up a steep hill, around the top, and then back down again. And when you got 4 aircraft all dive bombing in at the Kotar, within a 2 to 3 mile box that we're in, it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point.
I do. I love flying IQTs. I mean, I don't think I will ever be able to fit enough flying into my life where I'll be like, doing one of these again is not going to benefit me somehow, even aside from the fact that they're just fun. It's fun to do the missions. It's fun to watch, we call them cadets, watch cadets do the missions as well.
Absolutely. And it's about, getting to know people. I mean, that's really what the whole IQT program is about. Aside from, learning the sim itself, it's a chance for you to get to know people who share the same passion for this sim, the F-16 in general, and you've always got stories you can tell, and like I say, it's fun to keep those relationships going and to fly these flights because almost every one of them is a perishable skill, and that is absolutely a neat part about IQT, is to get to know not just your instructor pilot but other members of the wing, and see that there are a lot of other people out there that really do enjoy this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a visual of that Top Gun movie where it's Yeehaw, Jester's dead, and we get a chance to do that here in the sim, as well as hang out with people that enjoy the same kind of activities. So it's been a great community.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, unless you guys have anything else, that sounds like an amazing place to wrap it up. It looks like we'll definitely be back. We already talked about at least one more episode we could do. Anything else, guys, on IQT before we
good.
Go ahead?
I think that's good. I really appreciate everybody tuning in and love the feedback we've been getting.
Yes.
So good feedback.
We'll keep doing it until you either tell us please stop or just stop tuning in. So.
Right. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I agree. We've been getting good feedback. We're happy to do more. We plan to keep doing them. We certainly would love to have you come by. The 440thvfw.com is where to find us. Jump on the forum, say hi, get registered, post a message. We've got a place for you to say hello. More than happy to have you do that and say, hey, I would just like to go up and get in the air with you guys and maybe get to know you, or even come apply, start doing IQT yourself if that's what you're interested. I think one thing we didn't talk about, I'll mention it very, very briefly, is that we consider recruiting to be a super important thing that we do. The nature of a hobby is that we have to always be bringing people in, and so it's actually really important to us as well, which is one of the reasons that IQT has had so much love and attention. We also have fun with it, but it's just important to us, and so we're going to keep it going. And so, come on by and you'll get a chance to experience it as well if that's what you want to do. But yeah, so I think thanks a lot, guys, for hanging out tonight. Always fun to talk to you, and so we'll wrap it up there. Call it a night. This has been the 440th VFW podcast.
Let's go fly.
Yeah.